Hello, everyone. This is going to be the first part of the demo for week 5, and here we have the conceptual demo. In the conceptual demo, we will just need to see an example. It's already been written. I just want to show you the difference between a request and session attributes. Like when I say request.set attribute or session.set attribute, are they the same or there is a big difference between them? Let's see that in using this example here. I have created a week 5 demo. It has test.jsp under webinf, and I have two servlets, test and test2. And if we open web.xml, just to see the linking, here I have the test, which is this one is linked with servlet.testServlet, and I have test2, and this one is linked with servlet test2 servlets. Now remember, when I say servlet dot, that means I have a package called servlets, and inside it I have these two files. And remember, these are the linking between those two servlets, and the path is here, the URL patterns. Now, the welcome file is called test. That means I'm calling the test. Now, who's the test here? I have test2 and test. That means I should go here. Now, who's the servlet that's responsible for rendering this? That means this one, servlet dot test servlet. Yeah, that means this one should be called when I click on the green button. We will go here, say, oh, who's test? Again, this is the /test. That means I should go here. Okay, now let's go and see the file, which is test servlet. Now, test servlets actually will do three things. The first thing is to set attribute for the request. This is the name of the attribute, and this is the value of the attribute. And then we are going to set the same thing for a session.set attribute. And remember, to work with session, you need to say HTTP session first. And this is the name of the session, and this is the value of the session. Okay, this is the name of like an attribute of the session. Okay, and then what we are doing, we actually do get request dispatcher to test.jsp. Now, what is test.jsp? Is a very simple JSP page. It just has two things here. The first one is just trying to print the request. Remember that we are sending this request object from test servlet. Okay, this is request object, and I'm trying to print it here. And then I am trying to print the session. Remember, this is the session. And the name of it is session object. If I save everything and I just run, and here we go. Now what we got the request, we got the session, and then we got the values that we passed. This is a request object, and here we got, this is a session object, which is similar to what we set here and similar to the data that what we passed here. Now, what's the difference between request and the session? I couldn't see now any difference between request and session. However, if I send my request to test2, remember, if we go to web.xml here, we have a path called test2, and test2 is linked with which servlet? Is linked with, remember, like we say, okay, this is test2 servlet, this is test servlet. That means I'm linking this with here. Now, that means let's open this and see what's the difference and how this would help us to understand. If I send my request to here, there will be a very big difference. I'm doing only one thing. There, remember that I'm setting a request, I'm setting a data for the session, and then I'm going to first to JSP. Here, I'm just going to test.jsp, and that's all. That means when the request comes to here, I just go to test.jsp. I'm not setting a value for the request, I'm not setting value for the session. And now I hope that you just pause the video and think, are we going to get the value for the request? Like, are we going to get data as here? Like here, I'm getting a data. Or for example, for the session, am I going to get the data for the session? If I just go to test2 here, and I just forward my request to test.jsp without setting any value for request or for session. Let's see. Now, to do that, just press enter. Remember that you change that to test2. I press enter, here we go. Now, what happens here is the main difference between request and session. Request was set here, and because we set the request in test servlet, then we send it to test.jsp, and we were able to print it. Now, in test2, I'm not setting any request value. Therefore, when we go to test.jsp, I see nothing here for the request. But you might say, okay, but we did the same thing for the session. Here in the session, I set the value for the session here. Okay, I set the value for the session, and I send it to test.jsp, and I saw that. But in the second time, I didn't set that value, but I still be able to see that. Because remember, this code actually is not a simple code. This is gonna be handled like this. When you see this code in Java, when they are dealing with session, what they are going to do, they're gonna say, okay, give me your cookie, give me your cookie value. Now, where's your cookie? To see your cookie, you just say inspect and go to application. And here we go. This is our cookie value. This is a unique value for our browser right now. And they did take that. Okay. And then imagine they create a new file, like just literally like something like this. Like they create a new file and they name this file as this. Okay, like they name file using the same ID, the same cookie ID that we gave it to you. And now what you want me to save? Oh, you want me to save this. I can save that for you. And I can save arrays, I can save objects, anything. Like this is not just for one thing. You can save, for example, here, for example, X, and you can save this as a number. And you can save here Y, and you can save this as an array, for example. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Doesn't matter. All data gonna be stored inside this file, which is 37B, etc. That means when you send me the data, like let's go back to here in the test2, what you did is actually just say, go to test2.jsp. And then what I did, I just went to test2.jsp. Here I say, okay, request, give me the request object. And the request say, okay, I don't have any request object. There is no request object. But what about session object? When I start searching for the session object, I found the session object where? I found it here. Okay, and remember that any request that the browser will make, any request, they will send me always the unique ID, which is this one, this number. They will always send me this ID, which is 37B for their browser. Like if you are now doing that by yourself, you will have a different number. We will not have the same number. Okay, now let's say that I delete this from my browser. Like I just go here, say inspect, and then I say application, then I can just like change one number, or I can even delete that. Let's delete it. After I delete, I refresh the page. What will happen? See, Java give me a new JSON ID, and they forget that data that they were storing that for me here. Remember, they were storing session object as this is a session object. Now, why did they didn't get that to me? Because very simply, I didn't pass the ID, or I didn't pass this name of the file, and therefore say, okay, you are not passing a name of the file. We're going to create a new file for you, but this file going to be empty. Now, if you want to set this data for this, just go back to test. Remember that because test here, test will actually do setting a data for in the session. Now let's go here, let's go to test. And as you can see, this is a session object. They set that to us and they are using this ID. That means they go to Notepad again. And they say, oh, okay, let's save this here under this name. And now what's the data that you need me to save? Oh, you need to save this, yeah? No, let's go and take this. You want me to save this. And they save it. Now, if we go to test2, remember that we're gonna stay using the same ID. Let's say test2, and here we go. Now the request is persist only for one time. When I do request.set attribute, yes, this will be available in test.jsp for the only one time. However, when I say session.set attribute, this will be available in test.jsp for the first time. And as long as I am using the JSON ID, which is the JSON ID, this is session ID, as long as it's a valid ID, okay, I'm gonna be able to get the data for you. Now, if I just change one number, huh? See, and just change, like I just remove number 1, click enter and refresh the page. I lost everything and they give me a new valid session. They say, oh, that session is invalid. We don't know that. And this is a new session for you. Okay, this is how Java is handling the session. And this is the main difference between request and session. Okay, see ya. And now let's go to part 2.